This is Becky, and I have about 10 maybe SharePoint sites and absolutely love them. It's been easy to get people in, and I'll just give an example that Mike will be able to relate to. We used to use Google Docs for Extension Leadership Team, and not even everybody from Extension Leadership Team could ever get in. And we switched to SharePoint, so now we can use what I call the real Word and Excel and everything, and nobody's had trouble getting in there, so that's obviously a huge success. We've created them here in AgCom for all kinds of different working groups. In fact, we probably have too many because Elizabeth was talking to CJ Johnson over in ITS, and he suggested having like maybe just one AgCom SharePoint site, but with various folders under them, and then different AgCom staff who work on different projects. You don't have to create a new SharePoint site for every project, but it can be a generic AgCom one. And then like the state FFA contest that some of us work on is under it, and publications is another folder under it, and some things like that. I don't want to scare anybody, but Elizabeth talked to CJ just a couple weeks ago, and he didn't go into details, but he suggested he wait and come over and visit with her later because he was going to show her how to do some shuffling and create the folders instead. And he said there are going to be some changes, so we might want to just wait on that. Okay, I do not know why you lost sound. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay.
Yep.
I can hear you.
Be on your end. Here's how I explain the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint. OneDrive is your personal file. You can share it. However, if you ever leave NDSU, your site goes away, and so the other people don't have access to it. Where SharePoint is truly a shared location. So a group can create it, and there can be multiple leaders, and people can come and go over time, and the group stays. Where the perfect example, and this might help everybody relate to it like it did me, Lori Sharmer was on the branding committee, and she said, oh, I'll create a OneDrive site. And I said, Lori, what's this rumor I heard that you're planning on retiring here pretty soon? And she said, oh yeah, June 30th, I'll be retired. And I said, okay, so we do not want to have you create a OneDrive site and share it, because then when your email address goes away, that whole site goes away. And she went, oh, didn't know that. So we created it in SharePoint, and there's 3 or 4 of us who have access to it. So when Lori left, one of us just took Lori's name off. When somebody else joined us, we just put her name on. So SharePoint is truly a group site, where OneDrive is one person site that you do have the ability to share. Clear as mud? The Lori Sharmer story explains it better than I possibly can.
I put a link on the chat box, but Sonia talks about this in the Let's Communicate, the last one that was just sent out.
We know there's a lot of confusion about that, so that's why we did add that to that little article.
Also on that Let's Communicate article, there's a link to SharePoint video by Microsoft, but when you hit that link, it's kind of a YouTube site, and you can find a lot of other useful YouTube videos about using SharePoint. Just gonna throw that out there.
So, Becky, this is Mike. Do we at all use Google Docs anymore?
NDSU has an official license for Google Apps for Education, and yes, you're welcome to use it. To be honest, the people I know who use it the most are Bob and Sonia. They just feel very comfortable with it, and they like it. Personally, I don't like how it doesn't use, as I say, the real PowerPoint and Excel. It uses knockoffs. So if you create something and then try to drop it into PowerPoint, for example, you might lose some of your formatting and things like that. But yes, it's still available. The official NDSU Google is still available, and some people like it, so you can use it. I think, Mike, you were one of them who had trouble getting into the ELT Google Docs even, weren't you?
Well, I was, and that's part of the reason I asked that question is because I think part of my confusion and why it didn't work is I had an account previously, and then NDSU built an account for me. And somehow, because of that, they counteracted each other. And and both of them was with my email address, so I think that's where part of this whole thing. And Gerald had the same typical problem.
I'm just curious if you on the call are any of you using the NDSU Google Docs?
I use it sometimes to share documents between coworkers, but mostly to build like online evaluations or surveys that I can email out to audience members or people I work with a lot. I find that Google Docs is easier at this point for me than Qualtrics, and anything is better than paper surveys.
Good point. I forgot about the forms function, Michael. That is really good for that.
This is Brenda. I use it for databases, access databases, because when I tried to use SharePoint before, it was a different version of a database, and I wasn't able to make it work the way I wanted to. So that's why I use Google Docs.
But I guess if we go back to the initial question Michael asked, and that was about the use of SharePoint, I know today I was in SharePoint twice with the NDSU ELT. SharePoint making some changes to some of the documents in there as it related to who is the mentor for this staff member, where are we at in recruiting, and some of those kind of things we keep track of, Becky. And I find it very user-friendly.
Here's my example that's fresh on mind. We are being audited by the state auditor's office. Doesn't that sound fun already? For print and copy services. We have to justify why we charge what we do. And of course, Diane has some information, and I have the salary information, and Joan has some. So we brainstormed this morning what our spreadsheet's going to look like, and we're putting it up in, to be honest, OneDrive, I guess, because we don't have a print and copy SharePoint site yet, which we need. And then everybody will contribute their part instead of emailing back and forth and losing it and who's got the latest and blah, blah, blah. So I'm confident that will work really well. That collaborative work is what OneDrive and SharePoint are so good for.
I really like it because I think there's potential for us to get a lot of work done and work in teams across counties and across the state without having to travel. And if we can get used to working in the SharePoint or online drives. I think that's kind of a lot of people would prefer to do that versus add travel time. I think we get a lot more work done and be more productive using SharePoint. And I will throw out another question. Does everybody on the call know how to get on to Office 365? And most people maybe do. If so, if you're thinking of like, oh, this team I'm working with could use a SharePoint site, do you know where to start on creating a SharePoint site? And maybe Becky could touch on that, or there's a few links I'll put in the chat box. But
I was starting to look up the links too, so thanks, Michael, for doing that. That, I forgot to mention, is one of the big differences. You can create, obviously, your own OneDrive site, but ITS has to set up SharePoint for a group. And so it's a real quick and easy form. You just say, what do you want to call it, and who are the administrators, and some things like that. And especially during the summer when things are slow, they have it done in like an hour. But they might want to ask you some additional questions now if it truly is going to change, but I don't know what that means when they say it's going to change. I did go to a SharePoint users group at Noridian, which had a lot of private businesses and others, and the first private business that demoed their SharePoint site, I honestly thought I was at the wrong place. I had no idea. It didn't look anything like our SharePoint site. I was totally lost. And then the second one, who was from some state agency in Bismarck, I don't remember which one, I went, okay, now it looks familiar. I have no idea, but it just has so much variability that each owner's not the right word. NDSU set it up for NDSU's needs. And so it's designed to work for our needs. And as some of us have said, it works pretty well for our needs, so hopefully the rest of you can figure out how it can meet your needs.
I will say something about sites looking different. So I'm on 2 SharePoint groups right now, and the layout of the sites are completely different, and it's all kind of based on the admin or multiple admins of that site and how they chose to set it up. And so that was kind of, it's still easy to navigate, but because the 2 sites look different, when I first started, it was kind of it was kind of hard going from one site to another and knowing where everything is. But for any agents out there, our Northeast District and our agents created our own SharePoint site, and we're trying to use this site as a place to share information and resources, share presentations we've given. There's a calendar option on it, so we're trying to update all of our district programs and events going on, try to put that up on SharePoint. And then we also have, within that SharePoint group, we broke up into teams, and we're trying to tackle AgNet, our programming, from more of a district perspective instead of just county-based. So we're across the district, we're kind of focused on and delivering programs of importance to the district. So that's one way that we're using it here.
Now, Michael, you said that you had a calendar as part of the SharePoint for the Northeast?
Yeah, yep.
If I can, so are you using that in place of the extension calendar or to complement the extension calendar?
So that's a great question. So it's really for a calendar for our district. I can't speak on the extension calendar because, to be completely honest, I don't know how much people use it. So that's what I know on that.
That's good to hear, Michael, because maybe we need a discussion on that sometime, because the whole goal of the extension calendar is for everybody to use that to avoid conflicts. Like when Deb Gebicke's trying to schedule orientation, the first thing she does is goes and looks at the calendar to see if there are other major conflicts. I can certainly see you guys using something that's just ag or just agronomy just in the Northeast. But if it's organizational, especially, I'd be curious, is the calendar, the extension calendar, a pain in the rear for you all to use? Or do most of you put stuff up on the calendar, or what? I would be curious.
Well, Becky, I typically don't put a lot of things up on the calendar. I use it more to double check potential dates for that one or two individual things that I schedule a year for the Northwest District. But I can tell you that I did look at it for this fall for a district conference, and basically from August 23rd until after fall conference for a district conference purpose, I potentially have 1 week where I could have staff there. So it is getting used, at least from the standpoint of inputting professional development opportunities.
Yeah, I'm on the calendar now, and I can see that some Grand Forks County things are put up there. I think I see an event from Molly. I think Linda Hammond puts that up for us. But so I'm on the calendar site now, and I've never added anything to the calendar because I don't know how, or it's just never crossed my mind. And a lot of things we're using on the SharePoint calendar is more a county program or district program events, and I get the point of having this NDSU calendar for not overbooking, but I think also with the broad area of programs we have as extension as a whole, like we have so much going on, it's really hard not to double book things. But can I add something to the calendar right here from the NDSU all events calendar page? How would I do that?
The extension calendar is through the Ag Info Center, and everybody goes, what? Okay. It's the place where you enter your QPRs, is how most of you know that. Yep. So yes, if you just go into the Ag Info Center, there's a link on the right side of the For Employees website. The biggest problem is people have usually forgotten their password, so just call the help desk if you forgot your password, and then just click on calendar, and it'll walk you right through it. It's pretty intuitive, but you even check, is this an A&R project, or is this a professional development event, or what? And is it only for the Northeast, or is it only for this group of people? And then the ones that are public automatically go to our website too. So it's not just used internally for avoiding conflicts, like Mike said, but that's where we publicize, here's what extension events are coming up, here's the field days and things like that. And so, Michael, I can see why you keep a separate calendar, like, you know, here's the day DeKalb is having their seed open house or something like that. So that's not the kind of thing that we would put on our calendar to promote. So there's needs for both. But the things like field days and regional or multi-county meetings, I hope you all will put on the extension calendar. There you go. Good example, Amy. Crop and Pest Management School future dates. Obviously, we don't want to schedule another A&R thing when that's going on. So there's reasons for both kinds of calendars. I still even keep my paper calendar in addition to my electronic calendar.
Thank you very much. I'm going to add our Grand Forks County Variety Plot Tour to the calendar, and I will work on making adding events to this calendar a habit. Any other questions or comments or shout outs to in regards to SharePoint or anything else tech or innovative related? This is the second tech coffee break I hosted that I wish I would have put a poll together ahead of time to see how many of us are using SharePoint or on a SharePoint site. So you could have like Becky, who's got 10 of them, or somebody has none. Yeah, Becky, some examples. Like I said, we have the Northeast District one for A&R agents, and it was commented on in another county why we don't do it for the whole district, so include all program areas and all agents. And we kind of, you know, again, we're an organization with a broad reach and on a lot of different topics. And so the A&R agents kind of wanted just a site to focus on A&R programming and planning and communication, but other other program areas could do the same thing in a district. And Becky said we can have non-NDSU people on SharePoint sites as well. So kind of provides a real opportunity to get people we do work with on a regular basis more involved in working with us and jumping in on discussions and providing information to us, because they can just drop it right on the site. So yeah, any other examples from people on the call today? Hearing none, I will. I see that. I see that Susan is on the call, and when Katie sent this call out, or the invite to this meeting out, Susan had a question, and that's kind of exactly what this group and this venue here is for. So she sent a question regarding Gmail. Something went wonky with her inbox, and it all got put to her junk mail. And it didn't take very long for our team to pass that around and for somebody to respond to her. So Amelia in Burleigh County does a lot with Gmail, and she was able to give Susan some information, and we passed that along. So did that information work for you, Susan? It was great, she says. Awesome. So yeah, that's I just kind of wanted to share that story of kind of what this our innovation team is for, and these tech coffee breaks. So really, any issues you have, you can reach out to any of us on the innovation team, and we'll do our best to help you solve the problem and then share it with other people. So. So other than Becky and Mike being on ELT and using a SharePoint, and myself with the Northeast District and our innovation team, there's got to be more people that are using SharePoint. If not, maybe this would be a good topic for fall conference or something. I'll throw one more thing out there. I'd also like to hear people's perceptions on my comment about, using SharePoint as a tool to continue to work in groups, and Skype is also a tool, so we aren't traveling as much. Budgets are going to get tighter, and I see that as one way where I don't really have to go far. I can hop on SharePoint and Skype and get a lot of work done without having to spend, an hour or 4 hours on the road.
Well, Michael, going down that path of your question, I guess, as we try to think about keeping people in their office, be it Skype, be it SharePoint, whatever, anybody know of, hopefully none of the people on this call right now or the Skype right now have this situation, but do you know of your neighboring agents, as an example, that are having problems with connectivity so that some of this technology isn't working well? And the reason I ask that is one of the things I'm considering for the Northwest District, because of that scheduling that I described earlier, is to actually just use Skype and have a half-hour session now, hour session later, that type of thing, and record it, so people can do it from home, so to speak. And if they can't be on at that time, they can watch the recording. But I'm wondering about the connectivity aspect. So.
Yeah, Mike, I think that's a really good point. I'm not. Sometimes when I Skype quite a bit with neighboring county agents in the Northeast District, and sometimes we've got a iffy connection, and sometimes it works most of the time it works really well. But I'm sure that is the case in a lot of rural counties where maybe internet speed or connectivity is really, really slow. But it would be kind of interesting to hear from people that are having that problem and see if it can be resolved.
Yeah, and Becky, maybe you have a list of some of those that have those difficulties.
Not really. The major problem we have when somebody says I couldn't get on the Skype is audio. And that's because, and I'll admit I'm an example, I forget, am I set for my headset or am I set for my computer mic or what exactly? And I swear 95% of the problem is check your audio. And once you get that set, you're usually good to go unless you jump back and forth. So that's why I don't use my headset anymore. I just always know my computer is on and the mic and the speaker. So most of the problem is with audio. As far as connectivity, I honestly haven't heard that problem with Skype for Business from anybody.
Yeah, just to touch on Becky's audio comment. So if you log into your computer in the morning, the first thing that should likely load is Skype for Business, and you have your little IM window. At the right, there's a little gear, and if you open that drop-down box, you can go into Tools and Audio Device Settings, and you can check your device settings to make sure everything's working before you get on a call. Here's a question. Susan asks, is SharePoint equivalent to Google for surveys, forms for our 4-H parents? You could probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, you can probably create a form and put it on SharePoint. And if the 4-H parents have been invited to the SharePoint site and use it, you could probably definitely use that way. But I think it's different from actually like Google Forms, where you can create a form or an eval and send it out to anybody. With SharePoint, it would have to be people that were invited into that SharePoint site. Is that correct? Somebody?
I don't know of any way to create them in SharePoint. There might be, but I'm not familiar. I always use Qualtrics. If any of you A&R agents got an email from Joe Zalesnik last week about proposals for fall conference, that was done in probably I shouldn't stretch it too far, less than 10 minutes in Qualtrics. It took me longer to figure out how to turn it on and share the URL with Joe than it did to create it. So I'm not sure I would use SharePoint for a form. I think Google Forms, Susan, is kind of a separate instance. Google Form is a little different than regular Google. And again, Bob and Sonia know Google a lot better, and they're not on today. But Qualtrics, Brenda obviously is our Qualtrics queen, so I haven't ever taken a lesson in Qualtrics. And granted, I did have to go up and have a lesson from Brenda once, but it's pretty self-explanatory. And if you just go to the NDSU website and search for Qualtrics, it pops up on how you automatically have an account, and so you can use it as an NDSU employee. But I think it's really quick and easy. So I wouldn't attempt to create a form in SharePoint just because I know there are easier, better options with things that are created for that purpose.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. Yeah, that essentially NDSU encourages Qualtrics, and we also have the Google account where we can do Google Forms. And I haven't tried to learn Qualtrics yet, but I use Google Forms quite a bit. It's fairly easy, and Sonia has put on quite a few trainings at fall conferences and stuff on Google Forms. Another comment in the chat, and I think this is a really good point, so this is why I'm bringing it up. Molly Sobey here in Grand Forks County says she'd like to set up a SharePoint for grant writing with stakeholders that are outside of Extension, and you can totally do that. And I think working on grants is a really good example of using SharePoint, because usually you have multiple people working on it. Things can be time sensitive, and so if you have a SharePoint up where people can access it at all times, that'd be a really good tool. So Becky, do you want to touch on Susan's question as far as Qualtrics and Google Forms, or one and the same, or in just different platforms? From my understanding, they're quite different.
Qualtrics is a lot more robust. It is designed as a survey tool. It can run statistical analyses out the wazoo. Google is more basic. It just creates the information, and like I said, it's been so long since I've done a Google form. It's more basic, but both of them can create a web page where people fill in and submit information, and then they give you a spreadsheet with that information. So they're similar. I wouldn't go so far as saying they're the same. That was a waffle, wasn't it? Brenda, do you have anything to add?
I just agree with you, Becky, that Qualtrics has more options. You can skip over questions. If you have a question that is like a yes or a no, if somebody says no to it, then they can skip to the question after that. The reports, although I think that's the most difficult part of Qualtrics to learn, you can provide the reports in just as an Excel download. You can also do like a PDF of, and it's a pretty nice looking report once you get used to creating them. But I've done or helped done a lot of different surveys. Some are just a couple questions, and then others go 25 questions, and then that's when the skip logic and the display logic comes in, where I don't think Google has that option. So and they have great tutorials in the help area also for Qualtrics. You just go in and you just watch the videos, and you can watch it in a separate screen, so when you're creating the survey you can be watching the exact thing that you're needing right there on a split screen or a second screen. So I've done a lot with Qualtrics, and I've been happy with it. So
I just added a link to our NDSU Innovation website, and there's a recording there from our Tech Coffee Break, like one of these from February 1st, 2016, and Bob Birch was facilitating, and it's you can watch the video. I highly recommend it, and hear Bob and Brenda discuss Qualtrics in Google Forms. So there's another resource for you. Okay. Any other comments or questions? I'll ask one last one because I have it written down here. Is there anybody using an app on their mobile devices, iPhone, Android, or iPad, to be able to access SharePoint pages that you're on? Is there like an Office 365 app? I started looking online before this meeting started, and I think there's something out there, but I don't know if you can get to SharePoint on it. I know you can get to OneDrive. So if anybody has any information on that, I'd be interested. Okay, if nobody has any more questions or comments, or give a shout out to somebody that's doing something neat with technology, I think we'll end this call and see you next month. Again, these are the first Mondays of the month, so it'll be August 1st. Becky put it in the chat. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you enjoyed the call. I think we touched on a lot of different topics, from SharePoint to Qualtrics and Google, and so thank you all.